Hi coders, this video is on chapter 14, the integ system, or skin. It's actually skin, nails, hair, etc. Okay, so in this section, you do have a few guidelines in the front of your I-10 book. It is mainly about pressure ulcers. Okay, so let's go through this real fast though, and then we'll talk about the pressure ulcers. So here's some anatomy of the skin, just as a refresher. Okay, I wanted to point out something to you. When we talk about burns, when we get to burns eventually, a burn is going to depend on how deep it goes. Okay, so if it goes all the way down here to this sub-Q tissue, you see where these arteries and veins are. So if it goes that deep and the skin is black and it becomes necrotic, remember necrotic means blackened because of lack of blood supply, because that means that it's so far deep that these the blood vessels can't deliver the oxygen and nutrients to the tissue, okay, and that therefore the tissue dies and it becomes what we call necrotic. Okay, so here's some layers of the skin. Again, just goes along with review of your anatomy. Okay, so you're going to see things like dermatitis, psoriasis. Okay, and here's a pressure ulcer. So a pressure ulcer or a pressure sore or a decubitus ulcer means that the patient lies in one position too long. Typically, they happen on what we call a bony prominence. Okay, so especially your heel, elbows, okay, where it lies against a surface for too long, and it starts to break down the skin. Okay, so pressure ulcers, what you need to know is they are diagnosed, or they are recorded in stages. Now, you as the coder should not have to identify the stage. It could be identified by the nurse or the physician, but it's going to be someone with a clinical background that should document the stage for you. Okay, but just know that as you're coding it, you need to know which stage it is. Okay, so that's pretty much what your guidelines are about, are documenting the stage. And then there's some guidelines on non-pressure chronic ulcers. Okay. So we've got some information about healing, evolving, gangrene. Okay. So when you have gangrene, you're going to have a notation about coding the gangrene and the pressure ulcer. Okay, so here's what I was telling you about necrosis or cell death. Okay, meaning that that part of the tissue is not getting any kind of nutrients or oxygen from the blood vessels. Okay. And then also in chapter 3, you're going to have anything related to the nail, hair glands, and sensory nerves, because that's included in the integumentary system. Okay. Nothing really major there. There's no guidelines on any of that. And then we talk about lesions. So several different kinds of lesions, if you remember from your medical terminology class. So here's some vocabulary and definitions, so you kind of remember what they are. And then we get down to what we call, this is where we get down to malignant. And the malignant melanoma, remember that is very serious skin cancer because it's black. Okay, so notice that because this is a malignant, we are now going back to the neoplasm table. Okay, so anytime you see melanoma, carcinoma, etc., you look up that word, more than likely it's going to take you to the neoplasm table, but you need to look this up in the index and be referred to the neoplasm table. Okay, so you're going to get back to that in this chapter potentially. And then the last thing in this chapter are things about preventions and screenings. Okay, so remember, Z codes are used for diagnosis or reasons for an encounter that when essentially there's not a definite diagnosis. So screening for malignant neoplasm, personal histories of foot ulcers. Let's say my father-in-law had to have a malignant melanoma taken off of his temple, so they did a skin graft, an autograft, meaning from himself, from his leg. They took a piece of skin from his leg and transplanted it up to his temple. Okay, so here's a skin transplant status, okay? Or, in his case, this is autologous, because it was from himself. Okay, so you may see some Z codes in here. Okay, but those are the big things in the integ system.